Welcome back to the Mission Possible podcast. This is Disabled Veterans Mass Foundation. We have our podcast called Mission Possible. We believe that all life challenges can be managed. This is where we just discuss real challenges of veterans that face diversity, and they overcome them with resilient support and with a mission-driven mindset. I'm your host, Joseph VanFonda, USMC Sergeant Major. I'm a wounded warrior. I'm the CEO for the Disabled Veterans Mass Foundation. Retired Marine, of course, and I'm right here with my my co-host, a great friend of mine, Dr. Marty Rossman. He's a pioneer in the mind, body, and medicine. And today we have an incredible guest, someone who embodies what our Mission Possible program is all about, resiliency. I want to welcome Jessy to the show. You know, your journey has been filled with challenges from combat deployments to personal loss, yet you've turned adversity into mission to help others. And I'll tell you what, I'm honored to have you here and call you my brother in arms. So Dr. Marty Rossman and myself welcomes you to the Mission Possible podcast.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Yeah. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Dr. Marty Rossman.
7-year Marine veteran, wounded warrior, Sergeant Major. Been a pleasure to work with all this time. And Jessy, is it Lakin?
Yep. Yeah, Jessy Lakin. Yep.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I wonder what I know of your story. It's a remarkable one, and thank you for being on here to share it, because I think it's an inspiring one. I know you've been to some depths, and you've come back from that, and that's what Joe has hoped, what we both hope, that we can inspire others who may still be down there in the depths. I wonder, you were in Iraq, you were facing life-threatening situations. Your base was apparently attacked by rockets, and apparently that left a serious and lasting impact on you. I wonder if you'd be willing to share what happened and how that has shaped your comeback journey.
Yeah. So I was a forward observer in the Army, a 13 Fox. We call ourselves fisters. We're kind of the bastard child of the Army.
No, not at all, Jessy. You can't be the bastard child of the Army. Come on.
You're an artillery asset attached to an infantry unit. So it's kind of a weird situation. But in the artillery world, you have the guns, then you have the brains, and then you have the eyes. We're the eyes. And so we were 06, 08 deployed to northern Iraq. Sadr City was our main AO. At the time, we were actually on Fob Taji, just north of Baghdad. And I worked in a shop called the Fire Support Element and the targeting shop. And so our mission was to find, capture, kill high-value targets across Alaska. And we had a lot of intel assets there, a lot of kind of people that just kind of provided resources for us to do our job. So I was an E5 at the time in the Army, a sergeant. I had my section of soldiers that were in the FSE, the Fire Support Cell, to say, and so their main mission was counterfire. My main mission was to gather data, capture, kill, send people out on missions, go on missions to find high-value targets.
So let me interrupt you. Are you talking about the 777 howitzer?
Yeah. So yeah, 577 howitzer is what we shot.
Can you explain that a little bit to Dr. Marty Rossman and what that equipment entails? Because I know it's complicated. I know it's a digital asset as well, that's connected to the 777 howitzer. I was wondering if you can kind of elaborate on that weapon a little bit.
Yeah. So you have the guns, which is the howitzer. And it's essentially a gigantic looking tank. And it shoots artillery rounds miles and miles away. You have the section that's there, and they're set up on a fob or an installation, and they shoot counterfire, meaning if somebody shoots at us, we shoot back at them. We use radar detectors to find out exactly where they came. and known intel. We throw up a UAV, we put it over it as fast as you can, and you try to reply with equal measures. While we were there, I think we shot some of like 6,400 rounds in combat, which is a lot. At the time, nobody shot that much since, World War II,
Right.
Vietnam era, right?
Was this during the 2008 timeframe? Was this your first deployment
Yeah.
in Iraq, in Sadr City?
Yeah, first deployment, 06, 08, was the surge, right? In the middle of the surge, we were just counterfiring like crazy.
I want to stop you there, Jesse. All right. So I remember my time, first time in Iraq was 2003, right before, the Battle of Fallujah and so forth and all that. But I want to talk about senses before you go into your story right now. So when you get into country, right?
Oh yeah.
You have to get certified be in the South in order to move north in terms of convoy operations, correct?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So we all had to, Army and everything, right? And you
Yeah,
were
you got
what? You were at a Fort Hood at the time?
Yep, Fort Hood,
Right.
Texas. Yeah,
All right. What division were you in?
First Cavalry Division.
All right. So they were badass, tell you the truth. So a lot of good history, a lot of history in terms of the cavalry right there in Texas.
Oh yeah.
So kudos goes out to that unit and so forth, because I know you took a lot of casualties, and
Oh yeah, yeah. Actually, my
absolutely.
first experience with war was in the 04 deployment. So when I first joined, I went to Korea, and then after Korea, I got stationed at Fort Hood, and I got there just, I don't know, probably April 1st. April 4th was a time called Black Sunday. So 4404 was our unit's deadliest day. And it was massive. And it was an ambush in Sadr City, Iraq. And so my first taste of deployment was being on Rear D, having to, they assigned me to the escort unit. So I would fly over to Iraq, over to Kuwait, and pick up, fly into Kuwait, and then up to Baghdad and pick up remains, and transport them back.
Okay.
And then do the full honor guard. I was part of the honor detachment, and I'm tall. The military, especially commanders and sergeant majors, like tall, good-looking soldiers, to put on the detachments.
All righty. Okay.
So I got assigned to that detachment, the entire deployment. So in the first kind of experience of war, I was escorting and honoring and giving flags to 35 different spouses and mothers and daughters, and children. I was presenting the flag, and that was definitely the very first kind of eye-opening experience after I raised my hands. I raised my hand and, said I would defend this great country. So after that deployment, they came back. We got in the full swing of things, redeployed back to Iraq very shortly for a 15-month deployment. So in the middle of it, my unit's, kicking butt, and we're taking the fight back to the enemy and really, doing what we were there to do.
Let me ask you, let me interrupt you one more time. I want to try to get to this point because I'm just thinking about my experience as well. So you're a sergeant, right? You're with the 1st Cavalry Division, you got a mission. You got to do your bump satellite patrolling and all that in convoy and get certified to move up north, which you've already been training prior to getting in the country. So let's talk about emotions and how you're feeling, right? Because there's a lot of unknowns. So here you are, in this new environment. And I know that you can still smell the smell. I know you can still hear and feel the uneasiness still after these years. So from having a small peripheral of emotions because you're focused on, the mission, when did you start, your peripheral of emotions start widening where, you're hearing every little thing that pops, and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
always alert, and you're not eating as much, and your mind is always turning because you're absorbing all this new environment and a lot of the unknown. Take me back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you start to kind of understand where you're at once you get into Kuwait. Once you get off the plane, you get into Kuwait, and the temperature, hits you, the 100-degree heat, the sun baking down. I think you're starting to realize where you're at. I was lucky enough, and I say lucky, I was lucky enough to experience a little bit of it, in the first deployment with the first Cav of going back and forth. So I'd fly in, get up there, spend a day up there, fly out, right? It was real quick, but what that brought to me was hearing combat, right? I wasn't seeing combat at the time. I was seeing the result of combat on our side, but I wasn't seeing combat at that time. I was hearing guns going off. I was hearing fighting, and then I was seeing the toll that it takes on our troops. And then the aftermath of it, the other side of combat, the side that most of us don't see when you're pulling the trigger, is how it affects our family members. But that deployment in 06-08, we get through Kuwait, and I was more focused on my soldiers than I was on myself. We get up to our installation, we get through Iraq, we get up to our installation, and you have in the Army, you have a left seat, right seat kind of change of command. Day one, we sat in the right seat. We were in charge. Iraq's, the insurgents started to shoot at us. And I remember sitting there, and our colonel at the time, our brigade commander, his name was Paulie Funk. He looked at us and he said, "Y'all ready to work?" And we looked at each other, because the unit that was there before would not shoot artillery back at them. They were just a free target. And so we're sitting there, we're expecting the same thing. And we look to our left and right, and he says, "Fire." We've got to work. And we started laying down counterfire and missions. And I mean, that's really when I realized, okay, we're in it, and we're going to make this happen. To be perfectly honest, I went outside the gate a handful of times. That wasn't my combat experience. But our unit, our section, myself and my soldiers, we shot 6,400 rounds in Iraq, and they say we had about a 90% success rate. That's a lot of artillery going down range. That's a lot of destruction. That's a lot of combat that we were putting into place. And there's absolutely fire missions. There's absolutely images when I close my mind that I see, right, and experiences that I could taste still. But I think it was that first day. That first day we were sitting in the right seat, and we were told it's time to start working. And from there on out, I mean, it was a 15-month straight deployment for me, of just nose to the grindstone, making it happen.
What about your emotions? So you're going through, your operational tempo. You're trying to create your battle rhythm as you first get there, because you know how that,
oh, yeah,
right seat, left seat. And Dr. Marty Rossman, what Jesse means by right seat, left seat, like for instance, when I was with the Warlord, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, and we were actually taking over the 501st security area in the Babel province, we sat in the right seat, for about 2 weeks, right? And they sat in the left, and they took control of the missions, but we were learning their cycle of operation, their fishtail, the bat, their jump. I mean, we were just learning what they did to get an idea of the AO and so forth. So that's what Jesse means in terms of that. So Jesse, I know you lost a friend, right?
I mean, go back on those emotions, right? I think my emotions at the time, I remember writing it down. I had I would say it's a journal, but it was a Bible that had some, it was that Bible you get in basic training, real small one, it had some blank pages on it. I kind of used that as a journal, that first deployment. I remember writing on there some of the along the lines of, I didn't think I was, like, I went to deploy thinking we weren't going to live, right? I wasn't going to live. I saw 35 people the year prior come back in, boxes with flags over them. So, I think my mentality, I remember going through that deployment in that mindset of, taking it a day at a time. You're alive today. Let's push forward today. Let's do what we got to do today. I think the entire deployment, not only myself, but I had, quite a bit of soldiers fall underneath me that, our day to day was let's get up, let's do the best we can, and see if we're lucky enough to do it again tomorrow.
Jesse, tell me about your buddy that you lost, because I know that's.
Yeah, well, so like I said, I was in this unit that our main focus was intel and finding and providing resources and capture kill. And so she was an asset that actually shared a desk with me. And if you think of like one of those fold up tables that we have, that you play cards on, that was about the size of our desk. So she sat literally right next to me for the entire deployment. Her name was Princess Samuels. She was an E5. She was an intel. Her only mission was to get as much data as she could, give it to me, and let me interpret it and put it out there for a mission. So one day, she was off shift. I just left the gym. I was getting back to my room, and she knocked on the door, and she wanted to go to the PX or something to send something out. So you have to walk around in buddy teams, type of thing when you're in Iraq, hold each other accountable. So we walk over to the PX. Or actually, I think we found some fob bikes, little bikes to go riding, because it's kind of a bigger installation. Taji was pretty big. So we ride the bikes over there. We go around the PX, she, doing something. I had to mail something out. So the little mailing spot was just outside the PX compound area. So we go out there, mail it. Well, Sergeant Samuels, she wanted to go visit a friend that she had in her choose. And so her little cabin that was on the way back to her place. So she dipped out a little bit ahead of me. So at the time, the military was kind of frowned upon those types of visits, if you want to say it. So she took off. She went to go visit her girlfriend, and I mailed out my thing. Well, when I'm mailing it out, the PX compound got attacked by rockets. So they were center focused on the PX compound. I don't remember exactly how many rockets hit, but I remember the first one that hit. And it took out the PX, it took out a couple of the other kind of stores. And the people there, they're just sitting ducks, right? It's just a huge building, big target. Again, going back, my section, my soldiers are the ones that are supposed to be counterfiring, right? So my mentality is, let me get back to them, make sure they're doing their job. Let's get the rounds back on the range. So I start taking off back towards our office, our talk. So I'm going as fast as I can, running through, another rocket's hitting, all to my right? They're all pretty far, but maybe 100 feet from me, 200 feet from me. I'm getting a little bit further away from them. And I get to where she's visiting her friend at, in the layers of trailers. And I don't know if you know what a Jersey barrier is. So you have a trailer, and then you have these gigantic columns of
Rocks and boxes of sand and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the idea of it is that's supposed to stop the rocket from hitting where the people are sleeping. And then in between those, there's columns of just loose gravel all up and down there. and it's real big chunks of gravel. And that's supposed to, if something does land in there, it's supposed to kind of soften the blow. So I'm running through that corridor and I see her to my left, and I turn and she's probably 200 feet away from me. I'm next to a Jersey barrier. She's right in the middle. She's trying to get away from her girlfriend's area because she doesn't want to get in trouble after reporting people. Whenever you get rocketed, all the command starts looking for everyone, right? So you're around, everyone needs to be accountable. You're supposed to get in bunkers. So she's running towards a bunker. Well, we're both in the middle of this corridor where if a rocket comes in, it's going to hopefully the surrounding area that was the engineers built was supposed to take care of it. Well, that's what happened. So a rocket comes over my head, lands pointing towards her. The blast area takes her out. It's probably 100 yards from me, which is about 100 yards from her, or 100 feet. And it takes her out. It knocks me down, the concussion, or the blast knocks me down, and I don't hear anything. I don't remember anything. I remember getting up and trying to understand what just happened, right? And I remember seeing her still over there laying on the ground. So I got up. I don't know how many more rockets were coming down. At the time, all I heard was just a high pitch, just squeal. It's fading in, right? The louder it's getting, not really understanding. I remember getting over to her and trying to figure out where to start. That was the tough part, is trying to figure out how long it took me to get there. Like, that's the tough part now, but at the time it was, once I got to her, where to start. And you don't know where to start to stop the bleed or to stop any of it. So I pick her up and I start moving towards the aid station, which is back towards where the PX is, 3 football fields away. So I pick her up, start heading back that way. I got about halfway and a Humvee pulls up, or a truck, I don't remember what it was, but we end up putting her on that truck, take her into the aid station. She bled out in my arms, give her to the aid station. I'm covered. Now start time to move back towards the fob so I could go back, make sure my team is doing their job. So I lay her down. The medics are trying to get me to lay down. I get out of there. I go back towards my section, trying to make sure they're doing their work, running through, and I'm covered in blood. So something made me think, okay, I need to stop and wash this stuff off before I walk back in to this area that, in front of my soldiers. I need to wash this off. So I jump in a shower hooch, which is on the way through these little spots. It's kind of like a trailer park, right? And then you have a big cabin, or a big shower hooch. So I jump in there, throw some water on me, and I don't remember much from there. I remember at some point somebody came in and said, "Hey, are you dead? Are you dead?" and started shaking me. And I look up, and it was somebody trying to wake me up or trying to do something in the shower. And this is come to fruition. This is hours later. I was in there for hours with just the water running on me. So I missed accountability. I missed all the artillery's been stopped. All the rockets been stopped at that point. And
so emotionally, you were lost.
Yeah. You don't know. I wouldn't say anything emotionally. It was, I don't remember. Right now, I can't remember. I remember thinking I need to wash this off.
Shell shock.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Exactly.
Definitely.
But I don't really remember what I was going through, what was going through my mind. All I remember going in there saying I need to wash this off to somebody grabbing me and like, oh my God, are you dead? You know, pulling me out. I remember hearing that. And so I'm getting, essentially at this point, I'm getting yelled at because I didn't report back. I'm not accountable. I didn't show up. And I have the medic guy over there saying, oh my God, this guy did a great job. He needs to get put in for this award. So I got two sides of the coin saying you're a horrible soldier and you're a great soldier. You know, at the time that messed me up for quite a while of, you know, let's just focus on whatever, the mission, move back forward. Yeah, so that was kind of the first big taste of, you know, blood on me, right?
So how
You know,
deep is it rooted? How deep is it rooted into you right now? I know.
right now,
So
yes.
if that's a horrific event, and you go through this traumatic event from what you observed, absorbed, and went through yourself. When did you get the business back on and get back into the mission mindset and take those emotions and kind of like suppress them?
Oh, instantly, right? So standing in front of your commander and he's yelling at you because you didn't report back, because you didn't tell him you were alive, because I was essentially concussed and knocked out in a shower, which he didn't hear or didn't care about. So standing there getting yelled at, that uh, that made me just suppress everything. That made me just, okay, all right. If you don't, you know, you're not hearing what everyone else is saying happened. You're just coming after me saying I'm this horrible soldier because I didn't show up, you know, to formation, or I didn't raise my hand. You know, that made me just lock up. And I said, okay, time to just put my nose down and just do my job, right? And just forget about everything. And so immediately just suppressed everything. Didn't think about it. I remember the funeral. I remember you know, going to it and just thinking in my head is like, how long was I laying on the ground? How many rockets hit? Or, you know, why wasn't I faster? Well, if I was faster, would she have lived? If I was stronger, would she have lived? If I would have done something else, would she have lived? You know, and kind of blaming myself at the time. And then the rest of the deployment, right? Her seat sat empty. I remember they tried to fill it and I came unglued, you know, like she was coming back, you know. Um, and so, but I didn't know that I was doing that, right? You're still in combat, you're still doing your job. You know, your mentality is just to forget about it as much as you can, but reality, you're not forgetting about anything. Every single artillery strike or any kind of rocket coming back in, you know, you're more hypersensitive. There's more to it than just I mean, to be perfectly honest, prior to that, we got rocketed all the time. We got shot at all the time. Mortars came in all the time. So much to where you hear the sirens go off and you're sleeping in your bed. Instead of getting up and going to the bunker, you just roll over and say, if it hits me, I guess it was my time, right?
Right.
After that, it's like hypersensitive. It's like, okay, I know where, if I'm walking down this area, I know where I'm going to go if something happens. I know what I'm going to do. You know, so in that mentality, definitely had a shift. And then I stopped going to the gym, right? Which I didn't realize I did, but I stopped going to the gym. Prior to that, I was really in shape. After that, it was like, okay, you know, not only does everything in my body hurt, I have this extremely loud irritating, howl going on in my mind, tinnitus.
You got tinnitus. And I know you
Yeah.
got some bad tinnitus right now. Last night I was just
Oh
my
yeah.
ears just couldn't stop ringing, because I was with an artillery unit in the past and so forth, so I understand where you're talking about though.
Yeah.
Shot out, shot over, and it becomes your norm, right?
Oh
So you
yeah.
have this
Yeah.
new norm of being in combat. You take your emotions, you put it to back burner, you keep your mindset, but at the
Yeah.
same time, as you move forward in your deployment, that those emotions, if you get complacency, because as you know, Jess, we all hear that complacency kills, right?
Oh yeah.
So I wanted our listeners and Dr. Marty Rossman to understand your introduction into combat, right? Because I know that you deployed numerous times after that, all right?
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
I wish I could talk to you all day about this, but and I'm going to hand it to Dr. Marty Rossman for a few questions, probably or so. But I think I want to speed it up just a little bit after Dr. Marty Rossman asks you a few questions. Um, to now, you're getting out of the military now, right? Right? You're
Oh
getting out of
yeah.
the military now after, this big situation and then stacking other operations on top of that, right?
Oh yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
you're married, you got children, right? You finally come home, right? And you're not Jesse.
Yeah. I mean, I met my wife on that first deployment, right? I met her in the PX. Now my ex-wife, but I met her in the PX on that first deployment. And what I didn't realize I was doing was finding a coping mechanism, right? So I didn't know I had any kind of PTSD. I didn't know what PTSD was. I didn't know that I had a TBI. At the time, those were frowned upon things, in the military. I didn't know I had, anything. I just, I lucked out on that strike, that rocket. I have one little tiny piece of shrapnel in my shin that I covered up with a Band-Aid. That was the only scar that I had.
Well, that's a visible wound. Now, now you don't know about
Yeah,
your invisible wounds right now.
exactly.
Right? So
The invisible side.
your personality is being adjusted, right? You
Yeah.
lose an interest, right? And these are all those negative attributes that chip away at you in terms of post-traumatic stress and so forth. But you don't recognize that. And
Oh
as
yeah.
in active duty, you don't talk about those emotional things.
Yep.
Your focus is on a mission, right?
Yeah,
Dr. Marty
exactly. And
Rossman,
then,
what do you think about his evolution to this point where he meets his soon to be new wife, but then again he ends up doing some few missions and so forth. But I want to get to when you transition out of the military and then when you
yeah.
fall by wayside. But I want to hand it over to Dr. Martin Rossman right now.
Well, you can't say it too much. Thank you for your service. I'm curious. You mentioned that at the time, PTSD and TBI were not in favor. In other words, so I'm getting the picture that you don't want to hear about it. People don't want to hear about it. Your superiors don't want to hear about it. Is that the
Oh,
story?
100%. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're in a classic situation of the trauma victim. I mean, we have rape victims and childhood incest victims and so on. And one of the most harmful messages is like, don't ever tell anybody about this. We don't, in your situation, we don't want to hear about this. This is not something we want to deal about that. Is that
Yeah.
any different now? I mean, do either of you know if that's any?
Oh, it's light and day difference. They're awesome in the military right now. Yeah, I mean, light and day difference. At the time, the culture was drink water, drive on, right? Eat a couple Motrin, rub some dirt on it, you know, get out there and kick the door in, right? The
So you were,
mentality now is if you raise your hand and you say, hey, this is affecting me, they go to work for you and you're not affected, you're not losing your job, so it's the culture is way different in the military. It's amazing now.
well, I'm glad to hear that. So at the time, you had no idea, you were not having nightmares or getting into
Oh, I was having nightmares. I was absolutely having nightmares and flashbacks, and all of the things. But at the time it was like I didn't understand that that's what PTSD was. I didn't understand that that's what, it was just, okay, deal with it, wake up in a sweat of, a puddle of sweat and, get up and go for a run or, go to the, do something, right? Shake it off, whatever you can. We started freezing near beers. I don't know if you know what a near beer is, non-alcoholic beer. You freeze it and so you could sip the tops because the alcohol goes to the top. And so you try to get a little buzz, while you're deployed, that type of thing. That was the mentality. You didn't talk to anybody. You didn't do anything. But like I was saying, I kind of suppressed it and tried to find a coping mechanism. And the first essentially girl, just dove all in, right? We met, she redeployed. She wasn't in my unit. She redeployed back to Fort Bragg. She was just happened to be at our installation, saw me, and we started talking over the internet. It was before Facebook, MySpace Messenger, back in the day. And then as soon as I got back to Iraq or back from Iraq, she was PCSing up to Fort Hood. She changed her station, moved up to Fort Hood, and we were inseparable. She essentially moved in within, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. We were married, and I kind of dove all into that. We redeployed, she redeployed around the same time, went through all kinds of trauma that deployment. And then, after that deployment, another 15-month deployment, I got back and I was stop loss during that deployment. So I was supposed to have gotten out prior to it or during the middle of it. They stop lost me. Well, my unit at the time they gave me 30 days to get out. Normally you have a year to go through the out processing side of it. I got back and they said, hey, you got 30 days, figure it out. So I went through the kind of the quick end of getting out of the military, got all my signatures, turned in all my gear, didn't get a ETS physical or any of that stuff. They just handed me my medical records and said, go to the VA, good luck. And that was it.
So Jess, so I understand all that, and sadly it happens. It still happens now where, you push individuals out, they're afforded steps and taps, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the case is, and then you got to figure out, okay, the grass isn't greener on the other side right now because I'm not sure how I'm going to pay my bills. I have a family and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And then of course your operational tempo slows down now. Now you're in an administrative role right now, right? So now complacency starts sneaking up on you. Now you got some nights to yourself, right? So what happened?
Oh yeah.
So when did you start to unravel and all crap just friggin' happened?
Yeah, so as soon as I got out, right, I still didn't realize that I had PTSD. I still didn't know that I was being affected by a TBI and any of the things that I had. My knees at that point still didn't hurt. It was just I was just living. Thank God I was still alive, right? And all of my coping mechanism was my wife and now a kid, my daughter. And I got the first job that I could getting out of the military, a sales job at a dealership just outside the base. Another officer or artillery guy hired me, So I was kind of in that mentality of just ignoring everything, ignoring the back pain, ignoring the tendonitis, ignoring when I close my eyes, I see what I explain as fireworks. I explain it as color, hallucinating. When I close, or when I look at something for too long, I feel like this throb. I ignored all of that, and I just continued to do my job. Right. I went after about 3 months. I did go to the VA. I remember walking into the Waco VA and sitting down. again, not knowing where to start, had no clue where to start, but I was told, go to the VA. So I set up what I thought was an appointment. It wasn't. I called the number. They said, oh yeah, just come in. And so I go in, I sit down, and I'm in the VA hospital. Not even there's no VSOs there. There's no anybody that could start the process there. Right. But I'm in the wrong spot, right? And I didn't know that. I'm told to go to the VA. So I show up at the VA, and I literally sat there the whole day, kind of looking at other soldiers in the waiting rooms. And like there's this guy I was sitting in the same waiting room, and he looked like he went through war, right? I didn't look like I went through war. I felt like I went through war, but I didn't look like it. And so I'm looking at him going like, man, that guy deserves this more than I do. That guy, deserves to, to be seen by this doctor. I don't, I'm fine. It's just a few nightmares, I punch the wall every now and then. I take my anger out. I'm hot-tempered. I didn't realize that it was combat effect, at the time. I had no clue.
How did it affect your wife? When did your family unravel and you were all alone? You ended up becoming a single father.
Yes.
So that's hitting rock bottom now. I want to know, I want to give you a good 5 to 6 minutes on this, from hitting rock bottom to being in that hole, right? That invisible wound sucking you in like that black hole.
Oh yeah.
How the heck did you get out of it and be a founder of a nonprofit, to working in the veteran community, being part of the Alaska Warrior Partnership? Yeah.
So that's all Fort Hood. Keep in mind, my wife was a combat veteran as well. She deployed. She never went off the installation, but she did deploy. She saw trauma. She saw combat. So she's going through the exact same stuff that I'm going through. Right. We have 2 kids at that point. She's still active duty. She gets stationed up here in Alaska. So we PCS up here. We move up here, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. Going through every 2 years, I get a new. I'm finding a new job, something going on. I'm trying to cope with whatever. So I started a photography business, because I could take a picture, and I get hired to go volunteer for a veteran outreach camp. It's called Warrior Days, Western Warrior Days. So I go out there, I'm taking pictures of all these veterans and their families, riding horses and that type of stuff. And I start to realize, oh my God, these folks are, they're like me, right? They have invisible wounds, so I want to volunteer. I start volunteering with them, which was great. And then they do outdoor rehabilitation. That was their mission. And I'm volunteering. I'm entwined with them. I meet a guy named Rick Casillo. He's an Iditarod musher. I've always had this fascination of Iditarod. It's a 1,000-mile dog sled ride race. And so we get to talking. A few months later, we decide we're going to start a nonprofit. We're going to figure out how to start a nonprofit. So we go down that rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to take care of veterans, right? In this mindset of my mentality of, I want to take care of veterans like how I'm feeling. How would I want to be taking care of them? And so we started a nonprofit. We're about a year in, and I get home one day and I find out my entire marriage is essentially a lie. So we just gave away a car to a veteran in need. We had a sponsor that had a car. We did this giveaway. We gave it away. My wife was there. I had her drive my truck back. I took her car back with the kids in the back seat, pull into the house, and I hear a burner phone going off, and about maybe 1% of battery life on it. I look at it and I see that she's been cheating on me, is what I see. So I'm like, okay, what the hell? Never expected it. Had no clue. And come to find out, it was her platoon sergeant. She was still active. She was dating her platoon sergeant as well. You know, the signs were never really there, but we're completely there now looking back at it. And so my life essentially crumbles. My support system, my coping mechanism is gone, right? The trust is completely gone. So at that point, I'm no idea. Still not in the VA system. Still have no, you know, like I know what I don't know. I had this weird. I could feel Sergeant Samuel's blood on me like all the time, right? So if I'm always doing this, I could feel like blood on me, and so like I remember after losing the coping mechanism side of it, you know, I go from a homeowner. I had 2 houses, had some money in a savings account, to nothing the very next day, homeless. I couldn't afford to put diapers on my kids. I still had the kids. She left. She disappeared for like a week from work, from everything. She just disappeared. And, you know, I had the kids trying to figure out how to keep them fed and alive and, you know, dealing with all my stuff. And I just hit this crash, right? It hit me hard. And at that point, you know, everything came back from combat, not only Sergeant Samuel's, but all the other missions, everything kind of is like a huge weight. It's if you put on a rucksack and there's just a brick for every single bad thing you do,
Absolutely.
you know, or everything that's ever happened to you in your pack, you know, how heavy it is. That's what it felt like. It's just a real heavy pressure pushing down on you. And you know, even though I'm in like the 2 nonprofits really kind of helped me at that time as much as they possibly could, right? They went to the house, they cleared out the house, they got as much stuff as I could. They're supporting me every little bit, but I'm not asking for help. It's so hard for a veteran to ask for help sometimes. But I'm getting my ass kicked at that point. I am absolutely hurting. So a week goes by. I have the kids. I'm out of the house. We end up talking. Me and the ex end up talking, and she says, "Listen, go back to the house. That's where the kids' home. I'll figure something out. We'll figure this out." You know, and at the time, I still had this like delusional hope that we might get back together, and we could fix it, right? So I go back to the house, and literally that night at midnight, I get a phone call from my cousin, which was a trooper, and he says, "Hey, I want you to know that the cops are coming. They're about 2 minutes away. They're going to probably arrest you and take your kids from you." And I said, "What the hell for?" They said, "Well, Deanna, your ex said that you beat her and she put a restraining order on you." The cops show up, and they don't arrest me because they didn't have any proof. I showed them video proof that nothing happened. I had security cameras in our house. And so there's video proof that nothing happened. I showed them. But since I still had a restraining order, they made me leave. They said, "You could grab whatever you want as long as it's something that you can live, that will help you live," and then you leave. So I left with nothing. I leave the house. So now I'm completely homeless, don't have my kids as a support system or my coping mechanism. And as my pride in my life at that point, I raised them, you know, like she was still working. I was essentially a stay-at-home dad at that point,
Right.
raising the kids. And, you know, nowhere to go, nothing to my name, $0, no job, nothing, right? So I start kind of trying to figure it out, just trying to move forward. But it's not working. Every time I try to take a 1 step, I'm like 3 behind me. So I would walk into the state office where it's supposed to provide you with like food stamps, those types of office, and
right.
I'm turned
Social
away,
services.
right?
Yeah.
I remember the lady telling me, she's like, you don't qualify for anything here. I said, well, why not? And she said, it was within 30 days of me getting a divorce, or not even being divorced, but separated. She says, you don't qualify. And I said, well, what would make me qualify? And I remember the lady, she dead looked at me and she says, well, if you were Black, pregnant, on drugs, any of those things, we could qualify you. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, just kind of, I didn't know what to think, I was bitter, I was angry. And then I walked into another VA in Anchorage, and it's the VA hospital, and they didn't know where to put me and where to send me. I walk into the vet center, and that was the first time I actually felt like there might be an opportunity for me to get help, right? I walked into the vet center and saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. So they sit me in front of a counselor. The counselor talks to me for 20 minutes and says, yeah, I would really like for you to come back every other week and talk to me. You need to start your VA process. And so I started it that day. No idea what happened to it. It ended up taking 5 years. But prior to me actually going through that process, they dropped the ball like 100 times. The counselor, every time I showed up, she just wasn't there, or she was busy with somebody else,
right.
For my appointments. My appointments on the books, they just
And
weren't there.
yes.
Nothing's happening. So I'm in this dark tunnel at the time, and I don't know where to turn. I don't know who to ask for help. The people that I did ask for help aren't helping. They're not pointing me in the right direction. I'm clearly, like, every time when I walked into the vet center, I'm in tears saying, help me, because I have this I don't know, cloud over my head that says, you're never going to get your kids back. You're never going to find a job. You're never going to be able to support yourself. All this negative is how I felt with my back, my pain, all this stuff happening. So I look to my right. I'm sitting in this, if you would call it a hotel, or it's like, I don't even know. It was a shithole, to say the least. I looked to my right, and I had my everyday carry. So when I live in Alaska, there's, military, you carry all the time. I purchased it. This is the only thing that I was able to buy post. I went to a gun show and I picked it up for like $200, right? Because I had $200. I don't even know why, but I bought it. It was a Taurus 9mm, really crappy gun. And so I bought it, and it was sitting on a desk 3 feet from me, a foot from me, and I'm sitting there in this somewhat of an apartment. I look over, and I'm all this negative. You're never going to get your kids back. You're not going to be able to take care of them. You're not going to be able to, recover from this. And I grab it within 30 seconds. I grab it, cock it, stick it in my mouth, pull the trigger. And it doesn't go off. It was a light primer strike. So my mentality at that point shifted from, this is too much, to, what the hell? Why didn't that gun just go off? And so I rack another round. I look at it. I point it at a chair. I pull the trigger. It hits the chair. So it goes off. So I'm like, what the hell? So I go over and I find the bullet. I look at the bullet. There's an indent on the primer, but it wasn't a heavy indent. I look at the casing. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, what the hell? Why wouldn't that go off? Like, in my mind. But that gave me the ability to kind of focus on that instead of the negative. And I'm looking at the gun and the bullet, and I look past it in my peripherals, and I see a picture of Rick Casillo. So a little backstory: Rick Casillo runs Iditarod. He we started Battle Dogs at the time. The idea was to take veterans dog mushing, teach them about dogs, outdoor rehabilitation program.
Right.
And Rick, I jokingly around him, like, I always, whenever I introduced him, I would say, oh, he's kind of a big deal because he's an Alaskan celebrity, right? And Iditarod Musher is an Alaskan celebrity. So we were out and he was signing a picture for one of our states, our US senators, that was coming to a fundraiser or something for us. And so he was signing a picture. So that picture, when he went to get my stuff after I got kicked out of my house, he jokingly pulled it off the wall that was in our little man cave area, and he brought it, and he says, one day this is going to be worth something or something. And so he jokingly brought it. So it's laying on this somewhat of an apartment floor next to a pile of other crap that they brought to me. And I'm looking past the gun and I'm looking at this picture and I see him looking back at me, and I think, what would he do, or what would he think about me doing this right now? What would all those veterans that we're supposed to be helping do or think? And so I dropped the gun and I said, I'm thinking in my mind, I said, what would my kids think? What would all these people, what would the soldiers think? What would Samuels think, Princess Samuels? And I dropped the gun and I said, fuck this. I am going to figure out how to beat this. I'm going to get back in it. Like, this is not going to be my outcome.
Gonna let those people down.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really letting them down. It was showing them that I'm better than this, right? It was showing them that I don't deserve that. They don't deserve it, right? All those people that I gave the flag to, that first deployment that I presented the flag to, I didn't want somebody present my flag to somebody, right? So all of that mentality was more so it shifted from a negative focus to a positive. It's like my mentality is now going to be, I'm going to figure out how to be rated. I'm going to figure out that I have whatever's harming me, whatever this cloud is above my head, I'm going to figure out what it is. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to figure it out. And so I started trying to figure it out. I took everything under control, right? I grabbed the reins and I said, fuck this, I'm in charge now. And got up and went to work, got back in the fight. I went down and figured out, instead of the no's when I walked into a thing, they said, okay, well, you may not qualify or you may not be this. And I said, no, I do, and let's figure out how to make it work. You tell me what I need to do, what I need to show you, what I need to bring you, and let's make this work. I got more engaged with the VA, trying to figure out what's happening with my ratings, what's going on. That was a 5-year process. That was fighting for 5 years. Again, I didn't have my medical records. I didn't have any of that stuff. They handed it to me when I got out of the military. It stayed at my ex-wife's house. She burnt it, for all I know, right? So I had to fight through that process. I had to get everything that I possibly could get, and work as hard as I could to not be defeated by it. 5 years goes by of me figuring out every single resource in Alaska that could help a veteran.
Jess, let me interrupt you, brother. I get emotional when I hear your story because I have very similar story. Invisible wounds, PTSD, being in combat. So I feel everything you're saying. I mean, I can relate to you, brother. And I know the story goes on, and resiliency. I was in a think tank in the military about why are service members committing suicide prior to deployment, during deployment, after deployment. And it just goes back to resiliency from, how you were raised, mom and dad, no mom and dad, school, the environment, the community, did the village raise the child appropriately? One of those things. And here you are in the military, and everything is so mission oriented, right? They focus you on completing their short, long-term goals and complete the mission. And that's what I wanted for DVNF, because I knew I had invisible wounds, right? You can go out
Yeah.
kayaking, riding a horse, equine therapy. Yeah. And that, suppresses, that issue or that emotional compact that you put in the back burner, Dr. Marty Rossman, for that time being, right? Because your focus is on that 2,000-pound horse or fly fishing and so forth. But when you get off the horse and you're not fly fishing, that complacency kicks back in, and those emotions move from the back burner to the front burner. So I wanted something more from just, anxiety medicine that you and I are both on, or whatever the case is. I wanted something to understand, why am I holding on to things that I can't control? And that's when I reached out to Dr. Marty Rossman, and we created Mission Possible. And that's why we're here today, because your story is one of thousands of service members that actually are dealing with it on active duty, that transitioned out of the military, that are working that resiliency line, and sometimes they may not be able to pull themselves out of that rut, and they actually pull that trigger like you did, So, and we're, Tom F right here is saying, hey, thank you for your service and sharing your incredible story. If you can go back in time and talk to your younger self right after you experience combat, to what advice would you have to your younger self on PTSD and seeking help and coping mechanism? And that's a hard question, because when you're in the mix and the emotions are, you're combating the emotions, keeping focus and being a leader in front of your service members, right? You can't let those emotions arise. But what would you tell, and I only got a couple minutes for this, what would you tell your younger self?
Well, I think about this all the time, and there's no time traveling, but there is helping the younger vet. So I like to go to transition briefs, but I also like to just go and sit in the VA. And when that younger vet walks in the door and he's looking around at the other vets, I tend to talk to him. I tend to tell him, hey, spend the time, do the work, get in there. You need to be rated. Our focus, I really focus on those vets right now that are, in that same spot that I was in, right? I tell myself, if I was sitting in that VA room again and I looked to my left and I saw that veteran that was sitting there that turned and looked at me, and there was this old man sitting there, and I think I would tell myself to, this was 30 days after I got back from Iraq, and I walked into the VA, or 30, 60 days, whatever it was, walked into the VA trying to get help. At that point, I should have sat through it. I should have asked. I should have told people. If I would have been sitting in front of a counselor, 2 months from then, I would have figured it out. I would have, who knows what the outcome would have been, right? How much I could have changed. But at the time, it was,
All right, so
I didn't have that. So
right, so now you somehow had the grit. The round went off, but it didn't go off. It went off with the second shot. You got over that. You're in the trenches, and you somehow climb out with veteran support and so forth that empowered you to actually be working for Alaska Warrior Partnership. And do you think that serving other veterans is actually saving your life currently right now?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. My mentality is try to be as selfless as I possibly can when I serve, right? I don't like to post selfies or, any of that crap. But I honestly feel I'm super selfish, because I get a ton out of working with veterans and helping veterans and solving issues for them. So after all of it, I started, had this mindset of, okay, what can we do to build and take care of as many veterans as we could? And we built Battle Dogs up as massive as we could. But like you said, that's outdoor rehabilitation. The problem was, you go out, you do this amazing, awesome experience with camaraderie, and you build this great thing. But the follow through, where's what's fallen through. And so
Absolutely.
when Alaska Warrior Partnership stood up here, I fell in love with the concept. The idea is when the lights go out, we turn on the flashlight and show them the path, right? We're holding someone's hands and walking them through the process that when I walked into the VA and I sat there at a hospital, I'm the guy that they call them like, hey, I'm trying to get help, but I don't know where to go. And we point them in the right direction. We show them what they need to do, and we help them solve problems. Often we ask them questions and figure out problems before they even know they had the problems,
Right.
and point them in those directions. And
All
so
right,
with that mentality,
yes, I know, and I'm running short of time, and I really apologize for interrupting and so forth. But you know, I think that we're both like-minded. I just love your passion. I love your grit. I know you got resiliency, and sadly, I can really relate to the combat experiences. Yeah, I love your brother. I love your heart.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
on behalf of DVNF, the Disabled Veterans National Foundation, I'm going to offer you and award you $10,000. All right, and I want you to use that to serve veterans in your community in Alaska. And then, next week or whatever, we're going to connect, because I want a footprint in Alaska, because I know they're lacking veteran resources in Alaska. And I know you and I had a conversation
Absolutely.
about there. And I think that you can be a force multiplier, honestly, in a great partnership of DVNF. And I definitely want a footprint in Alaska. I'm going to get up there and see you. And we're gonna,
Yeah, come on up.
we're gonna do some fishing together. We're gonna talk. We're gonna problem solve on how we can impact the veterans in the community. So I want you to send me the address. What do I make the $10,000 award check out to my email today, whatever, and I'll get that award letter out. And I'm also going to get that in the mail, because I know you're doing great things for Alaska Warrior Partnership. I know that it's cold right there. I know that you go out there with your personal truck and you chop down wood, and you deliver wood to veterans in need. That because, as you know, fuel is a big deal. And isolation right now is complacency.
Oh yeah, massive.
And
Yep.
isolation is complacency, and that can kill as well, because I know that's on your mind. But I'm intrigued by you. I'm proud of you. I know that you have a lot to offer in the veteran community, and I want to push it. I know we're over a few minutes, but I want to push it over to Dr. Marty Rossman, because I know that he has some thoughts on this.
Well, Jesse, thank God that bullet didn't go off. And
Right.
and I would like, I'll have to talk to Joe, but if you'd be willing, I would love to have you back, because there's a lot to unpack here. And from my perspective, I think we often this problem, Mission Possible, and it's a package of skills, mental skills, mind, body skills, and planning and executing, and, getting your mind straight, and visualizing and all this kind of stuff. But you hit it on the head. When that bullet didn't go off, it got your attention, and and the thought, no, I'm not going that way. And it allowed, you'd reached rock bottom. That's as far down
Yeah.
as you go. You pulled the trigger. And when it didn't go off, there was a new possibility there for you. And you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. It sounds like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to move forward. And I'm not going to take that. That, to me, is the missing ingredient in all of this self-help work. We know how to teach people skills. We know what people can do. We can help with their creativity. There's no substitute for support of somebody who's been through it and who cares and who loves like you and provides, support and skills and so on. But the question that has gone unanswered for me for the 53 years that I've practiced medicine and studied mind-body medicine, that I'd love to have time to unpack, Joe, with Jesse and
Absolutely.
and maybe one of our other guests is it possible to help create that moment for somebody else without them having to put a gun in their mouth and have a bullet misfire? What is it, in addiction work and in pain work and so on? It's always, hoping somebody hits an early bottom, but you have to, the belief is, and the experience is that you have to hit the bottom before you can start to rise. And I'm just throwing the question out there for even our people watching and to think about, and maybe we can pick it up next month, Joe, is what can we do to help people hit that point? Because once you say, this is bullshit, I'm gonna do everything I can to make it better. You kind of took a new mission on, and that's one of we call it the mission possible. What does it take to make this your mission? I'm going to get off the canvas and I'm going to do what I can, and I'm going to learn what I can. I'm going to do what I can to build a better life, and in this case, help others. And so I don't have the answer to that, but if we did, that would make, I think, the biggest change in mental health care in the world that I've ever seen.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a breaking point in everybody, right? But here's the thing, though. He hit that breaking point, Dr. Marty Rossman, right? And he survived through it. There's a lot of folks that don't survive that breaking point,
Right,
and they're not here today,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So
so
to
I think,
recreate that breaking point,
yeah,
hypothetical with a patient or with a veteran in need, may be able to turn that light bulb on of resiliency and work through that issue without actually taking your life. I mean,
well,
I know it
yeah,
sounds
that's,
madness, or whatever,
that's the
you know,
question.
but
And
that's the
Joe,
question.
I'm sorry, but I don't have time to go into that today. That's why I'm
Absolutely.
thinking about if we can have Jessy back, because it is a huge question. Like I said, I've only spent 53 years on it,
Right.
but I'm hoping that we can have an in-depth conversation, because once people grab onto that, um,
Absolutely.
once people grab onto it, it's a whole different ball game. Then it's just a matter of learning and connecting and finding resources. Not that that's easy, but that's possible. But without somebody grabbing that, you can't do it. We can't do it. Our people who have, our 3,000 and whatever people who have signed up for Mission Possible, um, even we can't do it for them. Many of them don't go further than that. We're doing everything we can to encourage that, but that's the nub of it, and I would love to have an in-depth discussion about that. And
Definitely. So,
thank you
Jess,
for
I'm going to
everything.
work with you on that, Dr. Marty Roswell. Let's see if we can get you on our April episode. And I have a guest for the April episode that I think that's going to benefit the panelists right here as well for the Mission Possible podcast. I apologize, Jess. Our time is up. And I am grateful to have an honor and a pleasure to have you on our Mission Possible podcast, because we believe that when you transition out of the military, right, this is the hardest mission that you have to
Oh
deal
yeah.
with, because now, because of resilience, because of complacency creeps up on you, and you got that crazy monkey on your back, and that's the fight. But we believe that all life challenges can be managed, and this mission, all right, leaving the military is possible, and you're showing it right now, Jess. And I appreciate that, brother. I love you, man. I'm going to award you that
Absolutely.
$10,000. I'm going to get you back on
Thank
the
you so much.
podcast right now. You know what? And we're going to dive deep with your help, and you can help us help our listeners, and you can help Mission Possible on trying to find that moment, and maybe we can recreate that moment for others to actually observe through watching as well as listening. So, on behalf of the Disabled Veterans National Foundation, from my heart to my lips, brother, we love you. We're going to send $10,000 your way. I know you're going to use it. I know you're going to take care of your fellow service members, but also we're going to build a relationship. I want a footprint in Alaska, and I think you can help me with that as well. So on behalf of
Absolutely.
DVNF, Dr. Marty Rossman, thank you as well, brother. I know you got to go. God bless all of you, our listeners and so forth. I believe all life challenges can be managed. And thank you for listening to Mission Possible podcast with DVNF.
Thanks, Joe. And Jessy, you should know that one thing that I know does help turn people around is hearing other people's stories.
Yeah.
That affects people when when we hear your story. Thank you for sharing it in all of its rawness. I know that that's not an easy thing to do, but
Absolutely.
I think that story can turn people around, because a lot of people have felt that way, haven't quite reached that point, and are, and this can help. Like, I can do that.
Yeah,
you
we
know.
can't save the ones after the trigger pull. Sadly, you know,
Absolutely.
we want to try to save the ones before the trigger pull, and that's
Exactly.
the platform. Dr. Marty Rossman,
Yeah.
thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Jess,
Jess.
we're going to
Yep.
talk.
Thank you all. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to talk more, and I hope you have a blessed weekend. Keep warm in Alaska.